Well, good morning and welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Heavyweights podcast. And I am Ashton Hines. I am the newbie of the group. And by newbie, I mean I've been at this for about 3 years. I've had my license as a realtor. I've been working full time as a physical therapist assistant in home health. And I just finished my fourth flip. I've got one long-term rental. So I'm just now kind of learning how to do all the little steps to build your portfolio and try to get some traction and some momentum and really try to build something big and build some wealth. And helping me out with that is a good friend, a mentor, just an overall good dude, Tavis Westbrook. What's up, Tavis?
What's up? What's up? What's up?
Not much. Yeah, Tavis, if you've not heard before, Tavis has flipped over 200 houses. He's got a small commercial building. He's got some midterm rentals. He's got some long-term rentals. He's been at this for a long time. He's 15, 16 years, something like that. He's really been going after it. He's seen some ups and down cycles, and he's been a part of the Keller Williams Dallas Preston Road office that I'm at now. And there's over 600 agents there for years have leaned on him as kind of the investment guy. And so I've been blessed to have him in my life over the last year and learning from him every step of the way. So I ask a lot of good questions, and he has some pretty good answers. And so in this time slot for the last several weeks, we've done interviews. And last week we did Jessica Starr interview. She's a floor plan designer. She's got a great following on Instagram. She's got a lot of really, really cool things going. And so go and check that out. She talks about how to build your own home, how to, teaching people how to do that. We've had someone from the wholesale business. We've had flippers. We've had someone who used to carry around $50 million in his car in cashier's checks, driving down to Houston once a week. You've got to go listen to some of those interviews. I think you will definitely learn something, and I think it'll be entertaining. So today we don't have an interview, though. Before all the interviews, we actually did what we called the Real Estate Heavyweights University. And we're going to double back on that a little bit today. And the class we are entering into is one to learn about midterm rentals. And Tavis has a handful of midterm rentals at this point. And I just thought it'd be a really good idea to dive into that. I've used that phrase with some professionals, some other agents, and it's a little unclear. Okay, what is it, midterm? Everybody knows Airbnb. Everybody knows what a rent house is, but midterm is a little bit elusive. So I thought, you know what? Why don't we go ahead and learn about that? And Tavis is going to do a deep dive into one of his deals and talk about numbers and profit and all that stuff. And so I think it would be a great insight as to maybe it's something you want to add into your business, because it definitely is for me. So Tavis, why don't you kind of start us out? I don't think I've ever asked you this. When you started holding stuff, what was your first buy and hold? Was it a long-term rent?
So my first buy and hold was actually basically a house hack. I bought my first house when I was 21. It was kind of a funny story between my wife and I. We were dating, and I had just turned 21. My birthday's in June, so it was August when I met her, and we just started dating. And I'm like, "Hey, my plan is to buy a house this year." And the funny thing with that is, I moved out on my own pretty young. I moved in with an older brother when I was 15, and then was out of the house right before my 18th birthday. I'd moved to Austin and was working down there. My first place was a room for rent, so it kind of was on my own very early. And so many things I was running into, I had to be 21 years old to do. And so it was funny because I didn't realize I could actually buy a house at 18. Now, if I would have qualified, it's a different story. But nevertheless, in my mind was, when I'm 21, I'm going to buy a house. So I turned 21 to meet Tabitha. She's actually was in the mortgage industry at the time. She was on the underwriting side. She worked for a wholesale mortgage company. And so she was very familiar with it. And again, she kind of laughed at me and said, "You're crazy," and you kind of speak it into existence and start, making goals happen and start working that direction. And the right opportunity opened up. Right. So it was actually a friend of mine that owned the property, and he was selling it was a rental for him, and he was selling it, and he had good equity in it. And it just kind of worked out. So we ended up closing on
Cool.
it, the latter part of 2021, and rolled into it and purchased it. And then Tabitha and I actually got married in 2022. So another funny part is
2001.
yeah.
I
Am I
didn't get
saying
married 2 years
2021?
ago.
Oh gosh. Yeah,
Yeah.
here we go.
You lost a
So
You
2000,
lost
yeah.
20 years.
It's too many 20s, man. Too many. We're talking too many 20s these days.
We're getting into the math again. This is going to be a bad episode. This is a bad one.
Yeah, don't do math in years. That obviously is not my strong suit when I'm talking about
Yeah.
years and math. Now we talk
That's right.
numbers and
Right.
purchases, different story. So, anyways,
2001.
2001, buy the house. Tabitha and I get married 2002. Geez, and we lived in the house for about 3 years or so, and then we decided to keep it as a rental and move to Plano. And actually,
Cool.
we had a lot going on at that point in time because we were basically we decided to rent it. I wanted to rent it, even though it wasn't in the business yet. Tabitha was on the renting side. I was actually in telecom at the time and thought this would be great, if I can keep this property as a rental. Well, it actually made more sense to keep as a rental than sell it because we didn't have a lot of equity in it, and the market wasn't, we didn't have huge appreciation back then. So long story short, I decided to keep it, rent it out. It cash flowed a little bit back then. I think it was, I can't remember now, but maybe the PITI was maybe $1,000 a month or somewhere in that range. And I think I rented it originally for maybe, 1,200 or something like that. Originally 1,250 maybe.
Yeah.
So it made a little bit, wasn't crazy, but it was, it started the momentum, if you will. And so
Sure.
we rented it out. We had the first set of tenants in there. I want to say at least 3 years or so. In the, immediately right after that, we moved to Plano. Things were pretty chaotic in the telecom industry at the time, and ended up deciding I wanted a career change. Real estate was calling my name, and I got out of telecom in June of 2004. Keep wanting to say 20. So 2004, jump into real estate, do a crash course at Champion School, get my license. I'm licensed in August, and start selling real estate. Yeah, closed my first deal in October of 2004.
Wow.
So nevertheless, have this rental. So, it's in my mind, right? I'm taking all the real estate classes, now I'm going into this. I'm a landlord, I own a rental, our first rental. We had bought our home in Plano that we live in now at that time. And, so anyways, that's where it started for me. And then,
Yeah.
I didn't pick up a second one, believe it or not. And this is, we talked about this before. One of the biggest regrets of not picking other stuff up. I shifted my business in 2009 to really get focused on the investment side. REO was big at that time and things like that. And, I didn't pick my second one up until 2016. So
Wow.
there was a big gap. There was a big gap
No kidding.
in picking up, more rental properties. And this is something I talk about. It's just that it's important to start thinking, wealth and picking off a property when you can. George talked about it as well. We've had a couple other people. I mean, Mark Fuller talked about the regrets as well. Man, I've flipped, hundreds of properties. Mark's probably done more than me at this point. I've done over 200. Mark's probably done more. George Roddy's definitely been exposed to more than me over the years, but it's just a different mentality. You just have to get, shift it. So in 2016, we picked up our second one, and then, it started to become a little bit more clear. I'm like, hey, I need to pick up more. And then I believe in 2019, I picked up a third one, and then let's see, 2020, I picked up two, I think that year. And then 2021, I think we picked up, a couple more. And then anyways, we're up to about 14 doors now, including the commercial property,
Wow.
which is, 5 doors.
Yep.
So, we really got serious over the last couple years.
Cool.
But
so tell me this. So you have the background of the long-term rental. A lot of people are really familiar with it. long-term rentals, we said it before, kind of a benchmark numbers. Hey, can I get 1% return? I'm all in for $200,000. Can I rent this for $2,000 a month? Around here, it's very difficult. Abilene, it can be, done. Around here, you can get close. I actually penciled a deal for a potential investor out in Crowley, out in East Texas a little bit, and it for sure had the 1%. So it's doable. So what made you start thinking about doing the midterm thing? Was it just the numbers didn't pencil on a certain deal, and you thought, yeah, but if we can rent it for this, did you have a friend that did it, and you're like, what the heck? You're bringing in a lot more than I do. Like, what kind of turned that for you?
Yeah, it was kind of the multiple things, right? So yeah, anything that when numbers started getting into the mid 200s to 300s, and up, it just the rents aren't 1% rule anymore, right? So it doesn't make a lot of sense. And now, of course, you're dealing with taxes and insurance as well that has completely spiked. Um, but what we looked at was a friend of mine did tap into it, and they got into a townhome. And mind you, their price point was pretty high. Their entry level price point that they got into, um, and they had kind of learned about this. Now, the mindset was executive rentals, and so this was like, I want to say they got into it around, I believe it was around 2020. They might have tapped into it in 2019. I can't remember exactly. Um, Nevertheless, they got into it, and the mindset was executive rentals. The mindset was corporate,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, kind of going after the corporate executive. And another friend of mine was doing, like corporate housing by owner. And so we had a conversation, and his was kind of a house hack. The other guy that had it in Las Colinas, he had lived in the home before, and then learned about doing, like corporate housing by owner, and he started doing it. And so at least I had some people to talk to and kind of just get an idea.
Yeah.
And it was very similar to the boom at the time, talking about short-term rentals, right? Talking about SDRs and Airbnb as everyone nicknames a short-term rental. Um, but one of the biggest things was 30-day plus, and a lot of it was like,
Yeah.
okay, avoid the riffraff, avoid parties, avoid um, you know trying to qualify people that are booking for just a weekend and things like that. And so we were trying to target more of the
When you're kind of running a
sophisticated.
hotel. Yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
you're
But
kind of
we were
you're
trying to
turning it
look at
over
it
really
for the.
quick, and
Yeah, and none of that really sounded attractive, right? I know how hard it is just being in the construction side of things when we have a hiccup, and I can't imagine. And there was a couple friends of mine that were doing the weekend short term rental stuff, and the biggest headache I always heard was the cleaners, and I was like, oh man, I could just see that blowing up, and friends of mine saying, they had somebody was in the house, for Friday, Saturday, and then they had somebody moving in Sunday evening, and cleaner doesn't show up on Sunday when the person moves out on Sunday morning, and they're over there with him and his wife cleaning and scrubbing the house because the cleaner didn't show up, and they
yeah,
didn't want to get a canceled booking. And I'm like, that sounds like a nightmare. First off, I don't like working
yeah,
weekends. And the next
yeah.
thing is I don't want to get a phone call last minute because the cleaner doesn't show up, and then I'm getting stuck on trying to pre-book this stuff. So the
And
short term
Tabitha
stuff
might
just.
stab you if she has to go over there and start scrubbing bathrooms. She would come out of the bathroom with a kitchen knife,
Yeah,
and
I
that would
mean,
be a one-time
we
deal.
believe it or not, we've done it back in the day for flips and investment properties and 11th hour crunches before. We've had our share just in the investment space by itself without getting into the stress of having something pre-booked. So anyways, that was attractive to me, is kind of just learning all that. And of course, um the artistic side of it, right, the decor side, and then putting everything together obviously kind of is right up my alley as far as designing and putting together something that was great. So a couple friends of mine do it before me, so it was kind of in the back of my mind. And obviously I get up every day, I've got multiple lead sources that go on out there from my network, et cetera. We've talked about that before. And so I get a lead. The very first one I pick up is in Plano. That's fourth quarter 2020. And I get this lead. I look at it and I'm like, yeah, it works as a flip. But as I kind of studied it a little bit more, I'm like, man, I think this might work. I think this might work
Mm.
as a midterm rental. We didn't even call it that at the time. We were still staying like Airbnb, but 30-day plus. I don't think midterm
Mm.
rental was even a phrase yet at that point in time. And we were saying corporate or executive rental.
Right.
And so, anyways, we get into it, and this house was hammered, man. So we basically took the same approach that we would with a flip, except I was able to talk to the bank about a buy and hold strategy. And so it changed the numbers a little bit versus like a flip, for instance, because they require a little bit more for the debt service coverage ratio, and we wrote the numbers way down. I wrote it at like a minimum of 150 a night, which comes out to be about 4,500 a month. And so I kind of looked at it that way. And so when I looked at what my principal and interest payment was, I believe on that property it was somewhere around like uh, $1,300 or $1,400 a month, somewhere in that
Mm.
range. So it was like, okay, $1,400 a month, and then taxes were roughly 5,000 a year. So you divide that by 12, and then your insurance, right? So insurance at the time getting into it was like 1,500-1,600 bucks. Now, of course, that
Mm.
number's like in the threes. Like every insurance policy I have right now is in the threes. Like it doesn't matter.
Mm.
Um, and so, you look at that. Obviously, just like you would on a 12-month term, you look at the numbers and break it down and go, all right, what's your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance? What's your monthly there? And then what can you rent it for? So if you're looking at the minimum 4,500 bucks a month at $150 a night, which again was pretty uber conservative. You can find the data on like AirDNA. You can also just do it from like a consumer mindset and go into Airbnb, go into VRBO, go to Furnish Finders, and just look at other properties out there as like a
Mm.
consumer and go, what's my competition look like? And so that's
Right.
kind of where I started. And then you have to really plug in for vacancy. So that's one of the biggest issues that you run into with this type of business, the midterm rental business, is vacancy. So you have to keep the back end open. So short term rental, the whole idea is you want to book your calendar, right? Um, and you want things pre booked, especially if you have like a vacation property in Broken Bow and stuff like that. Like there's people that have bookings for a year out from now. Um,
Mm.
for us, we can't do that because we need to be able to be flexible on the backside. And so, um, when you plug in your numbers, I was plugging in pretty conservative, like a 10-month rental. So 10-month rental, $4,500 a month is 45,000 a year, is the way that I kind of plug in my numbers from that point. And then you look at, you know, I've always been a big fan of figuring out my ROI with three main factors. So those three main factors is basically your cash flow, what the cash is left over after all expenses and reserves. So you got to make sure that you're putting up reserves for maintenance fees as well as vacancy, right? So you got to make sure you're plugging in that vacancy number. And if you're, you know, PITI, um, and then another thing that you have on this is the monthly expenses. So you've got, you're paying for, cable TV, we're paying for electric, we're paying for, gas if there's gas service to the property. Uh, and then one thing that we do in addition is the cleaning service. So we actually provide housekeeping every 2 weeks. And there's a reason for that. Is one, it keeps up with the property, keeps it in the best possible condition at all times. The housekeeper knows what to expect when there's a move out, and then it also is eyes and ears on the property every 2 weeks. So we know kind of how somebody's living in it, what they're doing. If everybody's on the up and up, everything's working cohesive the way it should. So once you plug in, those numbers, let's say, hypothetically, you're looking at, um, the $1,400 that you had for the principal and interest, then you've got another, call it, um, $300, for taxes. And then you got another like, you know, uh, 100, 150, $200 a month for insurance. So that's like five plus that. So call it like 1900. And then, your monthly expenses, are going to vary a little bit, but, throw in another $500 on top of that, so now you're sitting around 24 to $2,500 a month. So if you can, get it leased out for 4,500, obviously it's about a $2,000 a month gross income, or gross net, if you will. But you're going to have 2 months vacant, so you've got to back in, another $5,000 annually from that. Um,
Hmm.
so, the numbers look great, when you break it down, um, originally. So it looked very attractive, and it was like, hey, this is something we can get on. Well, what worked out even better for us is, we were wrapping up the renovations on the property in February, I believe. And I can't remember exactly when the freeze happened of 2021. The when DFW froze over. Was that February, or
Yes.
was that? It was February. It was like February 17th or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was after the first of the year. That's about right. That's
Yeah.
when ERCOT became famous. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we actually were out of town at the time. Tabitha and I um, we were in Jamaica, celebrating kind of a postponed anniversary because we wanted to go prior to that in August, but COVID restrictions wouldn't allow us. So
Mm.
it got shifted to February, and we were out of town. Fortunately, we had a house sitter, but we kept losing power, and so the pool
Mm.
froze over. There's a video of Landon running across of it, across the pool. And uh, our house vetted pretty well. I think at one point the kitchen sink wouldn't allow water to run through it. It had frozen up.
Mm.
But anyway, so that happens, right? And we got this property, and we're wrapping up, to get it done. Well, once that happened, we were in need. We were in heavy need. So we ended up getting somebody kind of locked and loaded that needed a place. They were living in a hotel, and we weren't done with the renovations yet. Like, I don't even think I was fully painted yet, and they wanted the place. And so
Mm.
we ended up booking it. I think they moved in April of 2021, and I believe they originally booked for 5 months, and then they extended for like another 2 months. So like our very first tenant,
Mm.
we looked out. We ended up getting 7 months. And when I analyzed the numbers and looked at it and said I need at least 10 months, to kind of make my numbers make sense. Getting 7 months off the get go was great. It was great
Yeah.
momentum to get things going. Um,
Sure. Yeah.
so I mean, obviously,
So a
I'm
quick question about
yeah.
so there's a quick question about the financing. So I know you use the traditional bank, and did you refinance that after the renovation, or did you have a product that accounted for the purchase and the rehab, and it was a long-term loan too? How did that work for you?
Yeah, so what I've got is, it's commercial bank loan basically. So this is in my LLC entity that we borrowed the money against, and it's a debt service coverage ratio type of loan. Has a
Okay.
5-year term, so it'll actually mature in 2025. But at the time we were able to lock it in. I think I've got 5% on it. And it's a 20-year amortized loan, but it matures in,
Mm.
at every 5 years.
Yeah.
So at the end of 5 years, we can look at it. I could roll it into more of a long-term conventional type of loan if I need to. Um, Obviously I've got a relationship with a bank, so I'd like to, continue to make it work there. Um, but that's how we structured it. But yes, to answer your question, we rolled in a good amount of renovation. Now, I believe I missed the mark on that one. I'd have to look back and see what it is. I ended up spending a lot of cash out of pocket because I don't believe I budgeted what it ended up costing me to do the reno on this house. I want to say that I only probably rolled in about 45,000 in reno when I first walked it.
Mm.
it looked to be pretty cosmetic. It had foundation work before. It was pretty much going to be, a dressed up cosmetic renovation. I was keeping cabinets. I was able to actually keep the wood floors in this house.
Okay.
But there was a lot of work that had to be done. And the biggest issue was the plumbing, the cast iron pipes failed. And so once that happened, then the bathrooms got gutted, and we were completely redoing all the plumbing in this house and everything else. So
Hmm.
that renovation budget with furniture ended up going into the $125,000 range easy.
Hmm.
So it ended up being a lot of cash when you plug it in. Again,
Yeah.
you plug in at the calculator, and I started to say earlier, there's three major ways you get cash flow, and then principal reduction, and then appreciation. And so, for me, fortunately, appreciation's been great. Cash flow has been even greater because we originally anticipated only leasing this thing at a minimum of 150 and 150 a night, and I haven't dropped it that low ever. Our original
Oh, okay.
booking was 175 plus $10 a dog, and they had two dogs, and so it was $195 a night was the
Wow.
original booking. And so that's pretty much been my average. It's gone up a little bit. I've had bookings up in the low twos before, and stuff like that. But so it's exceeded those numbers. And so the numbers,
And for
rather than
you,
4,500, I was going to say,
and for
rather than
you, you're getting a
4,500, it's been about 6,000 or more a month.
okay. Now, for you, your referral source, well, two things. We'll get to your referral source because I want to, there's a few ways you can go about this. There's the executive, there's insurance, there's traveling nurses. Those are all kind of along in the same route. So I want to kind of pick your brain on how you landed on where you are now. But let's circle back just real quick to the furniture, because that's definitely a huge difference between a long-term rental and this. This is along the same lines as an Airbnb. you know, you're sort of presenting a decent hotel. Now, I've been in a long term rental, just so happened when I was doing home health one time, I had a patient that was in town. They were there several months and it didn't feel anywhere as nice as yours do. So it's all relative. You don't have to do it anyway, but I mean, you are marketing it. And I know your style is actually really nice. And so I would imagine that initial, cost of putting the furniture in and stocking the kitchen and, really being thoughtful of how this is going to age and that sort of thing. Did you feel like you got it right the first time? Have you changed how you do that? How have you done the furniture thing in the next several ones?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think a lot of people miss the mark on that as well when they're planning this out. So we originally kind of got some ideas, friends of mine that were doing stuff in Broken Bow, and I was like, hey, what's it costing you to furnish these houses? And that the number that you heard a lot was like 15,000, and it was like, oh, okay, that's not bad. I will tell you this: the average that is costing me just for the furniture and the bedroom mattresses, and again, we don't cut corners on bedroom mattresses. We've been using Nectar mattresses. That's memory foam and stuff, but they work really well. I've gotten great great feedback on it. Throughout the couple years now, we're seasoned. Going on our third season or our third year with our first one here coming up in March will be 3 years on that property. So, anyways, I have had great feedback. So my thoughts are you can't cut corners on the beds, especially when somebody's going to stay there for a long period of time. I think you need comfortable mattresses. You need good sheets. You need good linens. Those are all important things to me. And then furniture that's going to hold up. I mean, there's been a lot of people obviously go for the cheaper stuff, and their mindset is, they're going to tear it up anyways. And my thought is, I need it to last. I don't want to be replacing the stuff. And you've stayed in Airbnbs quite a bit, and I've stayed on a few, and most of the time the couches are just completely uncomfortable.
Oh
They're
yeah.
terrible.
Yeah.
Like you could feel the whole wood frame inside of them. So,
Yeah, for
for
sure.
us, there's probably people listening to this that probably disagree. Um, But I would say that the furniture is usually between 10 to 15,000. That's actually the physical furniture. That's your dining room table and chairs. That's your accent chairs. That's your living room couch. That's your bed frames and your mattresses, and your coffee tables and your end tables, and that's your furniture. But then you have all the other stuff, right? So I mean, with us, and you obviously see it in competition. There's a lot of people that don't do this. All they care about is sticking a bed in a room, and that's it. There's no artwork on the walls. There's no TVs on the wall. There's no lamps. There's no, there's nothing, right? It's just bare bone walls. It's basically like a 12-month term rental, and they just stick some furniture in there and they call it a day.
Yeah.
That's some of the competition out there.
It's like a
um,
European hostel type feel, just kind of a
exactly, yeah,
quick
just
in
very
and out for the
stark.
night, Yeah.
Yeah, like my 12-month rentals, they're nice. They're not as nice as the midterms, but it's a different product, right? I mean, we're
Sure.
creating a home away from home. The idea of somebody coming in to a place that feels like a luxury 5-star hotel is that you get that experience of being comfortable, and you have stress going on. Typically, these people, especially the majority of our tenants, have been insurance based people that have been displaced from their home based on a flood, based on a fire, based on whatever, and they need a place to take their family and move, and then deal with the chaos of a remodel and all that on another side of things.
Yeah.
So we're
Sure.
creating this environment that they can be in and be relaxed, and and live comfortably without the stress of living, but deal with that other stuff that they're dealing with on the side.
Yeah.
So by the time you get into it, so the numbers, I've been saying that this last one that I did in Plano ended up costing me about 35,000 all in, with furniture, decor, necessities, linens, towels,
Kitchen.
sheets. And then you have the exterior stuff, right? Yeah, you got a full kitchen. You got to think about small appliances too. So we usually do like the little Ninja blenders. We do a crock pot. We do a skillet. We do hand mixers. You got to think about, people are living in these homes for a period of time, and a lot of people have spent
Right.
holidays there, and then they want to entertain. They've got family. They want to live life normally, and so you've got to
Hmm.
think through, like, they've got to be able to fully cook in a kitchen. They've got to fully entertain. They've got to be able to take care of their family, versus like a Airbnb for a weekend doesn't have to really worry about that. It's rare
Right.
somebody's going to be exposing the kitchen to its full potential on a weekend, right? Um, so we looked at on average, I've been saying it's somewhere between 25 and 30,000 all in, when you net look
Yeah.
at every single dollar you spend. Because we make sure that we're doing decor too. So, and I'm doing, fake plants, and I've got artwork on the walls, and, knickknacks and little figurines and stuff that are throughout the house that make it look like a homey lived in home. Um, and we've
Yeah, for
got,
sure.
different books and literatures, though, so that, you can relax and read a book. And it's been pretty cool. We've had some tenants that have actually, brought some books and added some books to the collection, and things like that over the years. So
That's cool.
that's been really cool. We're
Yeah,
big on
I've spent
having.
some time over there, and we just did a video on your Instagram and Facebook of your Huntington one, the latest one you've renovated. And so if you want to get a feel, Tavis has posted several videos of actually. I know Huntington, and I'm sure a few of the other ones in the past, but it definitely has that sort of masculine kind of hotel lobby feel, and yeah, I think it does a great job. Well, let's kind of wrap up a little bit, and let's talk a little bit about your referral sources, because if you're in the game of midterm rentals, your source of who's going to be coming to you and spending really good money on this varies a little bit. And early, like you said early on, as executives, they come to town, and AT&T needs them for a project for 6 months, and they have an allowance, and so we're going to put you up, and here's your budget. And then you have the traveling nurses and therapists. They typically are doing 13-week rotations, and they'll come to town, and they want to be up somewhere. That might be more of your condo, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom type places. Your larger homes maybe not ideal for that. And so the other source that I know of is insurance. And like Tavis said, when someone has pipes burst or there's an emergency or a fire or whatever, insurance policy kicks in and says, "Hey, here's your budget." And it's pretty legit. They don't. They tend not. It seems like they don't really mess around. So, how did you get set up with those? Is there an application process? Do you kind of just find one and it goes well and they call you again, or how would someone go about getting set up with the insurance?
Yeah, great question. So, there's a couple different options out there. I was fortunate in the very beginning. The very first tenant I got actually, was a matter of me actually posting property on Facebook saying what I was putting it out for. And somebody had reached out, actually, an agent reached out that knew friends of hers. And so it kind of, they found me, they found the house, and then connected back to the placement company that was facilitating the insurance company. And so those exist. Like, basically, that's up to the insurance company who they choose to hire, and those are placement companies. There's a policy in your insurance, or coverage in your insurance, that is labeled as ALE. It's alternative living expenses. And so you
Okay.
have companies that are designed around this that are in charge of placing you. So typically they are going to go to the easiest places to place you at first. Typically it's going to be a small hotel, or a quick hotel, or maybe the insured will go to a hotel because they have nowhere else to go, and then they'll look at apartments, and things like that. And so things like that start there. I mean, for us, again, we were kind of going after the executive or the corporate rental. My friends that had the townhome in Plano, they originally hired a management company to facilitate this for them. Now, mind you, the management fees when you get into this can get quite expensive because the numbers are high, and so they want to make some money. So those numbers typically somewhere between 20 and 30%. And you'll see this like in Broken Bow, for instance. If you have a management company handling short-term rentals for you, that number's pretty consistent. Somewhere between like 20 and 30% of the gross rents will be the management fee. But they usually turnkey it for you. So
Okay.
they're responsible for all the little details, when it comes to setting up the property. And if somebody wants a crib in there, they'll do it full service, so
Yeah.
a lot of times they might even provide the linens and stuff like that. So those companies do exist. And then of course you have the ones that we all know about: Airbnb, VRBO, furnish finders. Those are kind of the major three that the consumers know about. And you can list the property on those with minimums on days that you want to allow it to be marketed. So you can do minimum 3 days, you can do minimum 1 week, you can do minimum 30 days or minimum 31 days. Well,
Right.
that now that there's these restrictions in cities around us that are restricting people um, to not allow the short-term rentals anymore, people are forced to have to change the days, the minimum days, to
Yeah.
adapt to this. So we've seen a lot more uptick in competition. When I started this 3 years ago, there wasn't as much competition. We were, there was no inventory, and so we felt like we did really well. The rates are a little bit higher now. You pull it up, and there's a lot more inventory. There's a lot more people that were short-term rentals that have now playing in the midterm rental
Right.
game, or trying to, and their numbers are really low. But you can tell by the
Mm.
quality. It's also kind of created a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth now. I'm getting more requests now of people wanting to see the property before they book it, where Airbnb and VRBO before were big on, nobody sees the property. You've got to trust the pictures. You got to trust the information to book it. So that's been challenging for both sides, for the landlord side as well as the consumer side, on trying to find a place that you trust to get into it. So, it's taken time. I mean, 3 years into it, I've got some relationships and I've got some emails, with some of these placement companies. In fact, this morning, I sent out an email to, 3 or 4 different placement companies, as well as, making some changes on Airbnb and VRBO to try to get some triggers, right, to get some calls. And I actually got one vacant right now that you did a video for me the other day, or you narrated it for me and did a great job editing that video. Um, and so we obviously are trying to get that one booked up here. And both calls I got today actually were related to somebody that recently had some water damage based on this freeze that we just had. So as unfortunate it is for those people, obviously we're happy to play a part and be a solution in that situation.
Sure.
And we'd like to see more corporate, I think, kicking gear. I'm starting to get more inquiries sometimes that are corporate based or people that are relocating. I've had a few people that were in that position, but I think COVID changed that game, because everybody got comfortable being in virtual environments and Zoom calls and, things like that where they physically didn't feel necessary to travel. And so that kind of slowed that world down a little bit. So, it's interesting, we'll have to kind of see how those things play out with the corporate housing side, but I think it's picking back up. I think more people are requiring people to show up.
Yeah. Well, good deal. Well, I think that was a really good overview of kind of the concept of midterm and what it takes to get into one. Everyone's financing is going to be a little bit different on the front end, but they can be really good deals. And I think once the Airbnb, the people who were trying to do Airbnb, now they're trying to pivot. I think some of those will even fall away, because I think it's still this hospitality mindset is just not for everybody. And you realize that there still are, some high maintenance people at your house, and you're having to keep it nicer. And I think some of those will probably fall away. So hopefully your competition doesn't, jump up through the roof.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I
good
think
deal.
I meant to mention earlier. You mentioned something about the traveling nurses, and so that was another option. One of mine is very close to a big specialty hospital, so I thought I would get more activity there. But I think you kind of touched on it a little bit that like having a full 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage is not necessary for like a traveling nurse. And so they're
Yeah.
typically looking for that smaller unit, that 1-bedroom, 1-bath. Smaller units that are less expensive and easier to get into, and that type of thing. So I haven't had a lot of that, even though I thought that we initially might from that side of it.
Sure.
But anyways, you see them out there, but they're typically less, or it could be a great house hack. I mean, one of the things that I thought about, like with my kids, especially like Landon being 18 now and buying a house, like buy a house, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and then rent out the 2 rooms, and do it either through Furnish Finders or, do it through, there's an app out there called Roomster, things like that, where you can kind of house hack your own place before you, get settled down and have kids,
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I had a client that's looking to get into the midterm rentals, and I mentioned the traveling nurse thing, and he's actually looking for a pretty nice house, and it would not, it didn't dawn on me like, yeah, I doubt their budget is that to get into a 5-bedroom house somewhere or whatever. But for a long time, in my mind, that's kind of who was renting those things. So there's so many nooks and crannies of the real estate business. You can figure it out. Everyone finances them different and furnishes them different. And, there's just so many ways to do it, but I'm glad you broke it down because, me personally, I would love to do one at some point. I promise not to buy one 3 houses down from yours on Huntington and, go direct competition, just to see who can figure it out. But no, I will go across town at some point. So, but anyway, I really appreciate it and you being open about the numbers and all that sort of thing. So, well, stay tuned for our next episode, which will be this coming up Friday episodes. We do a market analysis, just kind of what's happening around the DFW real estate market. We touch on any news stories that are pertinent. And then, lately we've been finding an article or two and just kind of vamping on that a little bit, talking about, what the 6 most popular paint colors are for 2024. And those are all really funny to me because typically I don't agree with about half the stuff they write. So it's kind of a fun conversation. So in the meantime, if you could share this podcast with anybody, your friend, send them a link, say, hey, these guys are pretty great, good information. We really would appreciate it. And you can find me. I'm the Dallas Real Estate Guy on Instagram. Tavis is Tavis Westbrook, Travis without the R. On Facebook and Instagram, he has Tavis Westbrook Designs. And you can find him all over the internet. And until next time, we very much appreciate you. And we'll talk to you soon.